I thought, wait a minute, 1986, Cliff Burton, that was the year he died. By the time this magazine hit the shelves, Cliff Burton was gone. Okay, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. What I have here is a Circus Magazine from September 30th, 1986. And looking on the cover there, we've got David Lee Roth, we've got Sammy Hagar. Of course, this is after after David Lee Roth has left and Sammy's now part of Van Halen. And so that's in this magazine. They've got some stuff about Motley Crue. You just read the stuff. Oh yeah, David Lee Roth versus Van Halen after the split. The Titans of Rock slug it out with hot LPs and tours. So David Lee Roth, Van Halen, Judas Priest, Crocus. Do you remember Crocus? Ozzy, Metallica, and Dio. Those are all the different things listed here on the front of this magazine. And so I thought this would just be fun to just pull out an old Circus magazine and just flip through it and look at all the stuff. I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager and I was really getting into hard rock and heavy metal, I bought a lot of these things. And this would be kind of your connection to these bands and the stories and the things that were going on, because, of course, we didn't have the internet. It's hard to imagine the world without that now, but this was kind of our look into that. And then this is where we'd see pictures of these guys, and because other than that, we would have posters or we'd have what's on the records, but this gave us other things to look at and more information about what was happening. So I loved this stuff. So anyway, I just kind of grabbed a random one, and I thought this would be fun to flip through and look at what this was all about. Kind of go through a little bit of memory on some of this stuff. So we open it up in the front. Here's some advertisements. Right off the bat, you've got Denon, I don't know how you say it, Denon, cassette tapes and players. And this is pretty interesting. Cassette tapes were such a big deal back then. And I actually, the company that I own here, for those of you that follow this know that the company I own it's an analog to digital media company. So I spend all the time with cassette tapes today and dealing with them. So this is kind of interesting to look at this. Oh, then next page we have Yamaha electric guitars. You see some cool guy standing there in the gym, major in social studies. And it shows him, oh yeah, check that out. Okay, so you've got the cute girl over here and him playing the guitar in the gym. And then, I think I skipped a page. Oh, look at this. And then at the beginning of the magazine here, they have this full page advertisement for Triumph's The Sport of Kings. I used to love Triumph. I got to be honest with you, I didn't love this album. And they had become really... This album sounded to me very kind of cliche 80s in some ways, especially like this song, Somebody's Out There somewhere waiting for some... Anyway, full page ad for Triumph's album. Then here we have the table of contents, picture of Rob Halford there, James Hetfield, Mark Storace from, again, Crocus. When was the last time you thought about Crocus? That's some pretty cool stuff. And then the Metallica, Dio, David Lee Roth, Motley Crue poster on page 46. This is great stuff. Just remembering what this all looked like in here. And then we have a bunch of letters. I tell you what, we're going to flip through this and we'll come back sometime and read some of these things. Shot in the Dark, Raised on Radio. That's, then we have, let's see here, more advertisements. Listings, airplay, top 10 national radio airplay chart, Genesis, Invisible Touch, Peter Gabriel, So. That's interesting that those two, since Peter Gabriel used to be in Genesis, that they were both charting at the exact same time at spaces 1 and 2. Van Halen, Steve Winwood, The Fix, Emerson, Lake and Powell, Journey, David Lee Roth, ZZ Top, AC/DC. Then over here we have Donnie Baldwin from Starship. He joined Starship when they did Nuclear Furniture. So he was the drummer on laying it on the line, laying it on the line. Anyway, he played on that. So skipping through here, we have Diodario guitar strings, Washburn guitars. This is pretty interesting. Washburn is a guitar company that started back during the Civil War. I don't know that they weren't making guitars necessarily right then, but they started doing stringed instruments, and then but anyway, they've been around since the Civil War. They've got Alex Lifeson, of course, Rush, David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, John Waite. I don't think, does he play the guitar? At least I didn't know. Anyway, but they've got John Waite from the Babies, Leslie West from Mountain, listed right there. Robert Palmer. I've never seen him live play guitar either. Maybe they do, and I just don't know, because even Mick Jagger sometimes picks up the guitar. Anyway, so that's interesting, seeing them in this ad. Then we have Gibson guitar strings listed right here. That's kind of interesting. And then we have best-selling albums. Here we go again. Genesis, Peter Gabriel, Madonna, Top Gun soundtrack. So all these things were happening at the same time. Van Halen, Run DMC, Simply Red. Wow, look at all that. That is something. Okay, keep going here. A word find, and that's all the things in the in this word search. This is great. This is so much fun. Okay, and then over here we have when an original Gibson autographed prototype guitar. Let's see who's listed on here. Sting. Okay, everybody knows Sting and Andy Summers, both from the Police. Oh, Stuart Copeland, all three of them from the Police. Peter Gabriel, Bryan Adams, Keith Scott. I think he was a guitar player with Bryan Adams. Mark Rutherford from Genesis, Lou Reed, Velvet Underground, Paul Dean. That would have to be Paul Dean from Loverboy. Alana Curry, Tom Bailey, Joan Baez, you know that is Neville Brothers Band, know them. Robin Williams. So these are just famous people. Richard Belzer, he's the guy in Special Victims Unit. Bill Graham, these are music producers. Anyway, this was some sort of drawing for a guitar. Okay, Video Monitor. Aerosmith meets Rap Smiths, Crew and Dokken in the wings. So Aerosmith, Steven Tyler walked his way into the Run DMC video. So they're talking about music videos here. Wow. Over 2,000 screaming Aerosmith and Run DMC fans turned up in Union City, New Jersey recently to appear in the Run DMC's video with Aerosmith classic Walk This Way. That was a Rick Rubin thing, an idea to try to bring those two worlds together. You remember that? You remember when that video came out, what it was like, especially if you were an Aerosmith fan and you'd been hearing Walk This Way your whole life, and then all of a sudden there's Steven Tyler, and I remember he kind of busted through the wall, and Joe Perry was there in the room with him. And then that was the first time that I heard him sing the Walk This Way, Talk This Way, because in the original recording, it was walk this way, talk this way, walk this way, which I personally like better, but whatever. Okay, Sony cassette tapes. This is interesting because this was a new design that they put out. I think I have a video somewhere on this channel where I actually show this new cassette design they had, the inside of it. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Let's see here. So, front pages. Bon Jovi, Spirit of New Jersey, Twisted Sister, Ron Keel, He Is What He Wears. Do you remember Ron Keel? Ron Keel was, he had a couple of solo albums. He also, I think, sang for the band Steeler when Yngwie Malmsteen was with Steeler. And I don't know, I wanted to like him. I think I saw them open up for Judas Priest or somebody like that at one point. And then I went and saw them headlining at a little place. And I don't know, they just never really happened. Gene Simmons was heavily involved with Ron Keel. Kiss, a little thing about them. So Kiss, of course, at this point, out of the makeup, Bruce Kulick was playing with them. Night Ranger, there's Jack Blades. Oh, look at this, Hearing Aid. Remember Hearing Aid? That was the heavy metal response to Live Aid. I think Ronnie James Dio put that whole thing together. And look, it's available on beta and VHS. Only $16.95. Okay, now this is awesome. This is awesome. Do you remember when you could do this? 11 albums for a penny. Did you ever do this? I remember seeing this in not just Circus Magazine, all kinds of publications would have this. And you would just sit here and you'd like mark whichever ones you wanted to get. And then you'd put those in this list and you'd mail this in, and then they'd send them to you. And then you were obligated to buy like a handful of them over the next couple of years or something. I did this once or twice, and I ended up getting some pretty cool stuff out of it way back when. Okay, Here's Crocus. There's Mark Storace. Look at that chest hair. This is so awesome. Can't believe this. Crocus was actually a pretty cool band. And one of the things that I remember when I first heard them, because he sounded like Bon Scott. He was like, his voice and Bon Scott's voice sounded, to me, I remember as a kid, they just sounded almost identical. And it would have been kind of cool when Brian Johnson was having that problem a few years ago, instead of getting Alex Rose, getting him to come do it, because he could nail that he would have been able to nail that Bon Scott stuff. So cool. Anyway, Mark Storace. This would have been the time when the Blitz was out. I had that album. Headhunter had a couple of really cool songs. It had the song Headhunter, had the song Screaming in the Night on it. And I don't remember if the Blitz was the next one, but I think Headhunter was the only one that I ever thought was really all that great. I don't know. Then I got the Blitz, and the Blitz, actually, they were doing a cover of Ballroom Blitz, if you remember that song. Anyway, I wasn't a giant fan of them, but anyway, here's another guitar string. It's kind of interesting how many advertisements for guitars and guitar strings they had in Circus Magazine. Of course, here's Steve Vai, and you'll notice, I flipped through this once earlier just to kind of get a sense of what we were looking at in here, and you'll notice that he's playing a Charvel guitar. Now, if you don't know much about the Charvel guitar brand, I'm going to have to do a video on that sometime, because Charvel, this goes back to Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, how the Jackson brand came out of Charvel. And as a matter of fact, if you go pull out Van Halen 2, get your copy of Van Halen 2, especially if you have a vinyl. If you have a tape, you'll never be able to see it, or a CD, it's too small. But if you get your vinyl out, you can see that same logo on Eddie Van Halen's guitar, on Van Halen 2. And the easiest way to see it is pull the inner sleeve out, and Eddie's standing there with his guitar, and you'll see the Charvel brand on his guitar. Because Eddie Van Halen used to go frequent the Charvel guitar repair shop. And Grover Jackson, who started working for Charvel, had this idea that rather than just hot rodding guitars, they needed to start building them. And Eddie Van Halen was one of the people that had one of their early. He used to get them to hot rod things, and then they started building guitars for people. And it's a really, really interesting story, the Grover Jackson, Wayne Charvel story. And someday I'll make a video about it, because it's one of the most fascinating success stories, unlikely success business stories ever, in my opinion. It's so fascinating. Anyway, and he's selling Carvin amplifiers here. Okay, song lyrics. David Bowie, Underground. I do not remember that song. Eurythmics, Missionary Man. I remember that song. Don't mess with the missionary man. Remember that one. Then we have Dokken. It's Not Love. Do you remember that song? It's not love that left you standing. I used to love Dokken. And I Tooth and Nail was awesome. Under Lock and Key, I thought was way better. It was so good. And there's something really this little fast facts here. Check this out. And it's next to the lyrics for It's Not Love. George Lynch, guitarist on Dokken's Success. And then this is George Lynch. Dokken could not exist without the four of us. The band will always be Don, Mick, Jeff, and myself. None of us could or would want to do it alone. That's what being in a band is all about. And that did not age very well. Because, of course, George Lynch and Don Dokken had this notorious falling out over and over again. They get back together and they'd part and together and part. Jeff Pilson left the group. I think he's now out playing with Foreigner, if I'm not mistaken. And if you ever saw the movie, you remember the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg? Jeff Pilson is the bass player. And so, anyway, Dokken, they were so cool. I used to love Dokken. I loved his voice. I saw them in concert back in 2012, and Don just frankly can't. He's still cool. I met him afterwards and had him sign my record, but he just doesn't have his voice anymore. Oh man, okay, Andy Taylor. now he did a song called Take It Easy on Yourself, which was kind of a silly sing-songy song. But Andy Taylor put out a solo album, and he had this song. He had a song on there called that got a little bit of radio play, and it was called "I Might Lie." And I remember hearing that on the radio, thinking that is amazing piece of music. So I went and bought his album. It's called Thunder, Andy Taylor Thunder. And I went and bought the album, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I was not a Duran Duran fan. That's who he's from, by the way. Andy Taylor was originally in Duran Duran. And I was never a big Duran Duran fan. I bought a few other things. I thought they were okay. But when he went solo and made that album Thunder, I thought he was spectacular. And it was interesting. He actually created that album with Steve Jones. And if you pull the inner sleeve out of Andy Taylor's Thunder, you'll see a picture of Andy Taylor and Steve Jones in there together. And Steve Jones, of course, from the Sex Pistols. And then Steve Jones later put out a solo album, and it just frankly wasn't. It weirdly just wasn't. It wasn't good, and because I bought it too because I was so into Andy Taylor. But he was great. Andy Taylor had a very distinctive guitar sound. And the other place that you would have heard of him was with Robert Palmer when they put the Power Station together. And they did a cover of Bang a Gong, and Some Like It Hot was another tune. There's Some Like It Hot, but some sweat when the heat is on. And John Taylor from Duran Duran was also in that band. Anyway, and Power Station, those are the only two songs I thought that were any good on that album. Here's Kevin DuBrow from Quiet Riot. Kevin DuBrow has produced 3 tracks, whatever. Anyway, it was amazing looking back to how just giant they were when Metal Health came out. But The Wild and the Young, this would have been off of probably Condition Critical, which was the next album after Metal Health, which to me was just kind of a yawn. It didn't do anything. Metal Health, honestly, was, looking back, was a little bit of a yawn, but they were the first band to kind of bring heavy metal really, really into the mainstream with the song Metal Health. And then, of course, they had that cover, Come On, Feel the Noise. And the next album, Condition Critical, they tried to recreate that by doing another cover song by the same band, and it was called Mama, We're All Crazy Now. And it just didn't work. I saw them in concert. Kevin DuBrow had a really killer voice. Anyway, just that one album. So there's David Lee Roth, Yankee Rose. Remember when Yankee Rose came out? When he put that solo album out, I mean, that was such a big deal. And there's Queensryche, Walk in the Shadows. That was Rage for Order. I think we did a video on here not long ago of their EP, the Queensryche EP, which is kind of a legendary album now. And I got it out and we talked about it. And then The Warning came out, and it was good, but it didn't live up to the hype that we were all expecting after that great EP. And then it would have been Rage for Order that came out right after that. And I liked Rage for Order a lot more. The production was cooler. I don't know, there's something about it that was just way more interesting to me. I didn't care much for The Warning, but Rage for Order had some really cool stuff on it. And that had that would have been the one. I sometimes get these mixed up, but that would have been the one that had Walk in the Shadows. Anyway, it was a great. That was actually a really cool tune. Now here, Metallica declare the musical independence. Now there's. Like I said a minute ago, I flipped through this earlier and I found something really, really interesting about this particular magazine. And it's right here. We have a picture of Cliff Burton playing the bass. And when I saw this, I was flipping through this just to look at it before we recorded this. I thought, wait a minute. 1986, Cliff Burton, that was the year he died. And so I looked back, and he actually died on, I put it down here, September 27th of 1986. And look what day this magazine is, September 30th. So this magazine was being printed and shipped with him in it and this whole spread. And by the time this magazine hit the shelves, Cliff Burton was gone. And of course, it wasn't mentioned in the magazine because it would have happened in between the time they wrote this and then published it, and it made it out. And there's something that's kind of an interesting thing to note about this particular magazine. Something else that's kind of interesting that I just kind of noticed in passing is, Cliff Burton has this Misfits tattoo on his shoulder, and over here on this other page, Kirk Hammett has a Misfits t-shirt on. Anyway, that's kind of interesting. And getting back to that thing I was talking about earlier, this is the thing that James Hadfield's playing here. This is almost certainly a Gibson Explorer, although I can't really read it. And it's kind of an angle, but I'm almost certain that's what it is because he plays that a lot. But this guitar here, and this is a typical inlay, these little triangles of a Jackson guitar, and this is the kind of style similar to what Randy Rhoads would have had, and so this is almost certainly a Jackson built guitar, although you can't see the headstock, but I just thought that was interesting also, especially since we just talked about that a second ago. There's James Hetfield again. This is a drum machine. They were starting to become really, really a big deal back at that time. Did I just skip a page? I did. And then here, Dio, Ronnie James Dio. Some of you know, I just got back from a trip to Southeast Asia. I was in Thailand and Cambodia, and while I was on the plane, I was listening to Rainbow in the Dark, not the song, the book, Ronnie James Dio, and it's got some really fascinating stuff. It doesn't go into as much detail as some of the things I would have liked it to, but it has some really fascinating stuff, especially about Ritchie Blackmore and some of the experiences of the Rainbow and his early days with Elf. It's really, really an interesting book, and I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about that in some of these shows because I was a huge Ronnie James Dio fan. I thought he was just awesome, and so his voice, but after and his music, and this is after, of course, after Rainbow, long after Rainbow, and long after Black Sabbath at this point, and after Vivian Campbell. Because Vivian Campbell, of course, was his guitarist, the first guitarist that he had when he put out Holy Diver. But they ended up having a falling out later, and then he picked up this guy here, who is Craig Goldie. And if you don't know who Craig Goldie is, Craig Goldie, where we really saw him for the first time was, on a big scale, was with the band Jufria. Now, they had a big hit back in the 80s, and matter of fact, I saw Jufria when they opened up for Deep Purple on the Deep Purple Perfect Strangers tour. Anyway, and then he, I think, stayed with Dio all the way to the end. I think that he, I don't know that he ever got another guitarist after that. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, he ended up working with Dio for a long, long time. Vinny Appice was playing with Dio, but he also had originally played with Dio in Black Sabbath. And when Dio, after Live Evil, left Black Sabbath, Vinny went with him, and then they went off and did the solo stuff. And here's a full page advertisement for Charvel, and you'll see there that it says Charvel by Jackson Charvel. And again, there's such a fascinating story about Charvel guitars. It's so interesting. And then David Lee Roth. There, of course, is Steve Vai. David Lee Roth. A little bit of makeup on there, but David Lee Roth being David Lee Roth. Steve Vai was such an amazing guitar player. I actually saw him with the band Alcatraz. Graham Bonnet was singing for Alcatraz. This is Alcatraz. I don't know. Yngwie Malmsteen had been in Alcatraz before, and then Steve Vai was in there, and then of course this was when they put out the album Eat 'Em and Smile. And Steve Vai, and then Steve Vai later went on and played in Whitesnake. And anyway, he's just kind of obviously just a legendary guitar player. And so then, of course, there was the rivalry at this point between David Lee Roth becoming successful on a solo basis, and then since Van Halen now had Sammy Hagar, they were putting out 5150, and then there was that big, now there's obviously a rivalry between the two of them. And then, look at David Lee Roth again with the with the makeup. He's starting to look just a little different here. But he also always had the crazy outlandish clothes and things like this. And then the centerfold of the Circus Magazine is Motley Crue's Vince Neil. And anyway, which is kind of cool. And this would have been Theater of Pain tour at this time. And so anyway, we've been going on with this for a little while. I think I'm going to wrap the video here, and then we'll do a part 2 where we go through the rest of the magazine, where we see the other Van Halen stuff. So anyway, if you enjoy this stuff, please follow the channel, like the video, and leave your comments if you remember any of these people, any of the bands and the music. And I'd love to get your feedback about this stuff, of course. And so with that, have yourself a fantastic day.